The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. We'll skip the forward because I'm not dealing with that. Christopher Tolkien's a twat. The music of the Ainur. There was Eru, the One, who in Arda is called Ilúvatar, and he made first the Ainur, the Holy Ones, that were the offspring of his thought, and they were with him before aught else was made. And he spoke to them, propounding to them themes of music, and they sang before him. He was glad. But for a long while they sang only each alone, or but a few together, while the rest hearkened, for each comprehended only that part of the mind of Ilúvatar from which he came, and in understanding of their brethren they grew but slowly. Yet ever, as they listened, they came to deeper understanding and increased in unison and harmony. And it came to pass that Ilúvatar called together the Ainur, and declared to them a mighty theme, unfolding to them things greater and more wonderful than he had yet revealed. And the glory of its beginning and the splendour of its end amazed the Ainur, so that they bowed before Ilúvatar and were silent. Then Ilúvatar said to them, "Of the theme that I have declared to you, I will now that ye make in harmony together a great music. And since I have kindled you with the flame of imperishable, ye shall show forth your powers in adorning this theme, each with his own thoughts and devices, if ye will. But I will sit and hearken, and be glad that through your great beauty has been wakened into song." Then the voices of the Ainur, like unto harps and lutes and pipes and trumpets and viols and organs, and like unto countless choirs singing with words, began to fashion the theme of Ilúvatar to a great music, and a sound arose of endless interchanging melodies woven in harmony that passed beyond hearing into the depth and into the heights, and the place of dwelling of Ilúvatar were filled to overflowing, and the music and the echo of the music went out into the void, and it was not void. Never since have the Ainur made any music like to this, though it has been said the greatest still shall be made before Ilúvatar and by the choirs of the Ainur, and the children of Ilúvatar after the end days. And then the themes of Ilúvatar shall be played aright and take being in the moment of their utterance, for all shall then understand fully his intent in their part, and each shall know the comprehension of each, and Ilúvatar shall give to their thoughts the secret fire, being well pleased. But now Ilúvatar sat and hearkened, and for a great while it seemed good to him, for in the music there were no flaws. But as the theme progressed, it came into the heart of Melkor to interweave matters of his own, imagining that were not in accord with the theme of Ilúvatar. For he sought therein to increase the power and glory of the part assigned to himself. Tea. To Melkor among the Ainur had been given the greatest gifts of power and knowledge, and he had a share in all the gifts of his brethren. He had gone often alone into the void places seeking the imperishable flame, for desire grew hot within him to bring into being things of his own. And it seemed to him that Ilúvatar took no thought for the void, and he was impatient of its emptiness. Yet he found not the fire, for it is with Ilúvatar. But being alone he had begun to conceive thoughts of his own, unlike those of his brethren. Some of these thoughts he now wove into his music, and straightway discord arose about him, and many that sing nigh him grew despondent, and their thought was disturbed, and their music faltered. But some began to attune their music to his rather than to the thought which they had at first. Then the discord of Melkor spread even wider, and the melodies which have been heard before foundered in a sea of turbulent sound. But Ilúvatar sat and hearkened until it seemed that about his throne there was a raging storm, as of dark waters that would be made one upon another in an endless wrath that would not be assuaged. Yo, hello first time chatter, cringe opinion, banned, bye bye, I'm just reading. Where was I? Then Iluvatar arose, and the Ainur perceived that he had smiled, and he lifted up his left hand, and a new theme began amid the storm, like and yet unlike the former theme. And it gathered power and had new beauty, but the discord of Melkor rose in uproar, and contended with it, and again there was a war of sound more violent than before, until many of the Ainur were dismayed and sang no longer, and Melkor had the mastery. Then again Iluvatar arose, and the Ainur perceived his countenance was stern, and he lifted up his right hand, and behold, a third theme grew amid the confusion. It was unlike the others, for it seemed at first soft and sweet, and a mere rippling of gentle sounds and delicate melodies, but it could not be quenched, and it took to itself power and profundity, and it seemed at last that there were two musics progressing at one time before the seat of Iluvatar, and they were utterly at variance. The one was deep and wide and beautiful, but slowed and blended with an immeasurable sorrow, from which its beauty chiefly came. The other had now achieved a unity of its own, but it was loud and vain and endlessly repeated. It had little harmony, but rather a clamorous unison as of many trumpets braying upon a few notes. And it essayed to drown the other music by the violence of its voice. And it seemed that its most triumphant notes were taken by the other and woven into its own solemn pattern. In the midst of this strife, whereat the halls of Iluvatar shook and a tremor ran out into the silence as yet unmoved, Iluvatar arose a third time, and his face was terrible to behold. Then he raised up both his hands, and in one chord deeper than the abyss, higher than the firmament, piercing the light eye of Iluvatar, the music ceased. I must drink tea. Then Iluvatar spoke, and he said, "Mighty are the Ainur, and mightiest among them is Melkor. But that he may know, and all the Ainur, that I am Iluvatar, those things that ye have sung, I will show them forth, and that ye may see what ye have done. And thou, Melkor, shalt see that no theme may be played that hath not its uttermost source in me, nor can any alter the music in my despite. For he that attempteth this power, this shall prove but with mine instrument in the devising of the things more wonderful, which he himself hath not imagined." Then the Ainur were afraid, and they did not yet comprehend the words that were said to them. And Melkor was filled with shame, of which came secret anger. But Iluvatar rose in splendour, and he went forth from the fair regions that he had made for the Ainur, and the Ainur followed him. But when they were come into the void, Iluvatar said to them, "Behold your music." And he showed to them a vision, giving them sight where before was only hearing. And they saw a new world made visible before them, and it was globed amid the void, and it was sustained therein, but was not of it. As they looked and wondered, this world began to unfold its history, and it seemed to them that it lived and grew. When the Ainur had gazed for a while and was silent, Iluvatar said again, "Behold your music. This is your minstrelsy, and each of you shall find contained herein, amid the design that I set before you, all those things which it may seem that he himself devised or added. And thou, Melkor, wilt discover all the secret thoughts of thy mind, and wilt perceive that they are but a part of the whole, and tributary to its glory." And many of the things Iluvatar spoke to the Ainur at that time, because of their memory of his words and the knowledge that each has of the music he himself made, the Ainur knew much of what was and is to come. And few things are unseen by them. Yet some things there are that they cannot see, neither alone nor taking counsel together. For none but himself has Iluvatar revealed all that he has in store. And in every age there come forth things that are new and have no foretelling, for they do not proceed from the past. And so it was that is this vision of the world was played before them, and the Ainur saw that it contained things which they had not thought. And they saw with amazement the coming of the children of Ilúvatar, and the habitation that was prepared for them, and they perceived that they themselves in the labour of their music had been busy with the preparation of this dwelling, yet knew not that it had any purpose beyond its own beauty. For the children of Ilúvatar were conceived by him alone, and they came with the third theme, and were not in the theme which Ilúvatar propounded at the beginning, and none of the Ainur had part in their making. Therefore, when they beheld them, the more did they love them, being things other than themselves, strange and free, wherein they saw the mind of Ilúvatar reflected anew, and learned yet a little more of his wisdom, which otherwise had been hidden even from the Ainur. Wow. Angles, am I right? This is angling crazy. Now the children of Ilúvatar are elves and men, the firstborn and the followers, and amid all the splendours of the world, its vast halls and spaces, and its wheeling fires, Ilúvatar chose a place for their habitation in the deeps of time and in the midst of the innumerable stars. And this habitation might seem a little thing to those who consider only the majesty of the Ainur, and not their terrible sharpness, as who should take the whole field of ardour for the foundation of a pillar, and so raise it until the cone of its summit were more bitter than a needle, or who consider only the immeasurable vastness of the world which still the Ainur are shaping, and not the minute precision to which they shape all things therein. But when the Ainur had beheld this habitation in a vision, and had seen the children of Ilúvatar arise therein, then many of the most mighty among them bent all their thought and their desire towards that place. And of those Melkor was the chief, even as he was in the beginnings, the greatest of the Ainur who took part in the music, and he feigned even to himself at first that he desired to go thither and order all things for the good of the children of Ilúvatar, controlling the turmoils of the heat and cold that had come to pass through him. But he desired rather to subdue his and both elves and men, envying the gifts which Ilúvatar promised to endow them. And he wished himself to have subjects and servants, and to be called Lord, in a master over other wills. But the other Ainur looked upon his habitation set within the vast space of the world, which the elves called Arda, the earth. And their hearts rejoiced in light, and their eyes, beholding many colours, were filled with gladness. But because of the roaring of the sea, they felt a great unquiet. And they observed the winds in the air, and the mass of which Arda was made, of iron and stone and silver and gold, and many substances. But of all these water they most greatly praised. And it is said by the elder that in water there lives yet the echo of the music of the Ainur, more than any substance that is in this earth. And many of the children of Ilúvatar hearken still, unsated to the voices of the sea, and yet know not for what they listen. Now to water had that Ainur, whom the elves called Ulmo, turned his thought, and of all most deeply was he instructed by Ilúvatar in music. But of the airs and winds of Manwë, most pondered who is the noblest of the Ainur. Of the fabric of the earth had Aule thought, to whom Ilúvatar had given skill and knowledge scarce less than Melkor. But the delight and pride of Aule is in the deed of making, and in the thing made, and neither is in possession nor in his own mastery. Wherefore he gives and hoards not, and is free from care, passing ever on to some new work. And Ilúvatar spoke to Ulmo and said, Seest thou not how here, in this little realm of the deeps of time, Melkor hath made war upon thy province? He hath bethought him of bitter cold immoderate, and yet hath not destroyed the beauty of thy fountains, nor of thy clear pools. Behold the snow and the cunning work of frost. Melkor hath devised heats and fire without restraint, and hath not dried up thy desire, nor utterly quelled the music of the sea. Behold, rather, the height and glory of the clouds and the ever-changing mists, and listen to the fall of the rain upon the earth. And in these clouds thou art drawn nearer to Manwë, thy friend whom thou lovest. Then Ulmo answered, Truly water is become now fairer than my heart imagined. Neither had my secret thought conceived the snowflake, nor in all my music was contained the falling of the rain. I will seek Manwë, and that he and I may make melodies forever to thy delight. And Manwë and Ulmo have from the beginning been allied, and in all things have served most faithfully the purpose of Ilúvatar. But even as Ulmo spoke, and while the Ainur were yet gazing upon the vision, it was taken away and hidden from their sight, and it seemed to them that in the moment they perceived a new thing, darkness, which they had not known before except in thought. But they had become enamoured of the beauty of the vision and engrossed the unfolding of the world which came there to being, and their minds were filled with it, for the history was incomplete and the circles of time not full wrought when the vision was taken away. And some have said that the vision ceased ere the fulfilment of the dominion of men and the fading of the firstborn. Wherefore, though the music is all over, the Valar have not seen as with sight the later ages or the ending of the world. Then there was unrest among the Ainur, but Ilúvatar called to them and said, I know the desire of your minds, that what ye have seen should verily be not only in your thought, but even as ye yourselves are, and yet other. Therefore I say, let these things be, and I will send forth into the void the flame imperishable, and it shall be at the heart of the world, and the world shall be. And those of you that will may go down into it. And suddenly the Ainur saw afar off a light, as if it were a cloud with a living heart of flame. And they knew that this was no vision only, but that Ilúvatar had made a new thing. The world that is. Thus it came to pass that the Ainur some abode still with Ilúvatar beyond the confines of the world, but others, and among them many of the greatest and most fair, took the leave of Ilúvatar and descended into it. But this condition Ilúvatar made, or it is the necessity of their love, that their power should thenceforth be contained and bounded in the world, to be within it forever, until it is complete, so that they are its life and it is theirs, and therefore they are named the Valar, the powers of the world. But when the Valar entered into Ea, they were at first astounded and at a loss, for it was as if naught was yet made which they had seen in vision. And all was but on point to begin, yet unshaped, and it was dark. For the great music had been but the growth and flowering of thought in the timeless halls, and the vision only a foreshadowing. But now they had entered in at the beginning of time, and the Valar perceived that the world had been but foreshadowed and foresung, and they must achieve it. So began their great labours in wastes unmeasured and unexplored, and in ages uncounted and forgotten, till the deeps of time, and in the midst of the vast halls of Ea, there came to be that hour, and that place where was made the habitation of the children of Ilúvatar. And in this work the chief part was taken by Manwë and Ainulindalë and Ulmo, but Melkor too was there from the first, and he meddled in all that was done, turning it, if he might, to his own desires and purposes, and he kindled great fires. When therefore earth was yet young and full of flame, Melkor coveted it, and he said to the other Valar, This shall be my own kingdom, and I name it unto myself. I love tea. But Manwë was the brother of Melkor in the mind of Ilúvatar, and he was the chief instrument of the second theme that Ilúvatar had raised up against the discord of Melkor, and he called unto himself many spirits, both greater and less. And they came down into the fields of Arda and aided Manwë, lest Melkor should hinder the fulfilment of their labours forever, and earth should wither ere it flowered. And Manwë said unto Melkor, This kingdom thou shalt not take for thine own wrongfully, for many others have laboured here no less than thou. And there was strife between Melkor and the other Valar, and for that time Melkor withdrew and departed to other regions, and did there what he would, but he did not put the desire of the kingdom of Arda from his heart. Now the Valar took to themselves shape and hue, and because they were drawn into the world by the love of the children of Ilúvatar for whom they hoped, they took shape after that manner which they had beheld in the vision of Ilúvatar, saved only in majesty and splendour. Moreover, their shape comes of their knowledge of visible world, rather than of world itself. And they need it not, save only as we use raiment, and yet we may be naked and suffer no loss of our being. Therefore, the Valar may walk, if they will, unclad, but even the Eldar cannot clearly perceive them, though they may be present. But when they desire to clothe themselves, the Valar take upon the forms, some as of male and some as of female, for that difference of temper they have even from their beginning, and it is but bodied forth in the choice of each, not made by the choice, even as withers male and female may be shown by the raiment, but it is not made thereby. But the shapes wherein the great ones array themselves are not at all times like to the shapes of the kings and queens of the children of Ilúvatar, for at times they may clothe themselves in their own thought, made visible in forms of majesty and dread. And the Valar drew unto them many companions, some less, some well nigh as great as themselves. And they laboured together in the ordering of the earth and the curbing of its tumults. Then Melkor saw what was done, and that the Valar walked on earth as powers visible, clad in the raiment of the world, and were lovely and glorious to see, and blissful, and that the earth was becoming as a garden for their delight, for its turmoils were subdued. His envy grew then... I'm losing my mind. His envy grew then the greater within him. And he also took visible form, but because of his mood and the malice that burned in him, that form was dark and terrible. And he descended upon Arda in power and majesty greater than any of the other Valar, as a mountain that wades in the sea, and has its head above the clouds, as is clad in ice and crowned with smoke and fire. And the light of the eyes of Melkor was like a flame that withers with the heat and pierces with a deadly cold. Thus began the first battle of the Valar with Melkor for dominion of Arda, and of those tumults the elves know but little. For what has been here declared is come from the Valar themselves, for whom the elderly spoke in the land of Valinor, and by whom they were instructed, but little would the Valar ever tell of the wars before the coming of the elves. Yet it is told among the Eldar that the Valar endeavoured, in despite of Melkor, to rule the earth, and to prepare it for the coming of the firstborn. They built lands, and Melkor destroyed them. Valleys they delved, and Melkor raised them up. Mountains they carved, and Melkor threw them down. Seas they hollowed, and Melkor spilled them, and naught might have peace or come to lasting growth, for as sure as the Valar began a labour, so would Melkor undo it or corrupt it. And yet their labour was not all in vain, and though nowhere and in no work was their will and purpose wholly fulfilled, and all things were in hue and shape other than the Valar had first intended, slowly nonetheless the earth was fashioned and made firm, and thus the habitation of the children of Ilúvatar established at last in the deeps of time, and amidst the innumerable stars.